Very welcome to this seminar. I am Lennart Wohlgemuth and I am a board member of Swedish Development Forum, FUF, Föreningen för utvecklingsfrågor. We have had a number of seminars this autumn on securing peace. And this is the second one in this series. And we call it, What Does It Take to Make Peace Work or Last? We have been extremely lucky to get a prominent activist from Chad to come here. Chad. No, in Swedish it's Chad, actually.
Okay.
To come here and give her presentation on what it really means to work on these issues in a very difficult region. Her name is Amalkher Djibrine Souleymane. Yeah. And I'm going to call you Amalkher during these discussions. And we know that Chad is not a very well-known area. We know also that the conflicts that has taken place in the region are not very much in the press every day. So we are going to do this thoroughly from the beginning. We are going to talk a lot about the context to understand first the context and what we are talking about, and then we are going to try to see what a few very active persons are trying to do in order to uphold and secure a lasting peace in a region of where there are have been historically a lot of problems. And as there are many basic issues involved, this is a very important case study when we discuss the question of war and peace. Let me start by saying that it is very easy to start wars. It's very easy to erase long-term building up of peace and democracy and human rights issues. But it's so tough to reconstruction build up. I mean, the transition from war to peace is extremely complicated and very difficult and full of hidden agendas and people who are driving different issues and trying to stop all positive developments. So this is a very important issue to look at very carefully, and I personally think that there are few areas where this can be so well illustrated as in the Chad region. So, Amalkher, I'll ask you to start with a very careful and comprehensive presentation of the situation in the region, so that we know where we stand, and from there we will have a discussion on what you are doing and what can be done by others, what you expect from us, from the international community. So Amalkher, the floor is yours. We are very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. My name is Amalkher Djibrine Souleymane. I am representing the Women International League for Peace and Freedom in this section of Chad. I am also representing a youth organization in Chad called Nirvana for Women and Youth Empowerment in Africa. You know, Chad has a very long war and violence story. We have had more than 30 years of instability coming from violences, inter-community violences, and military interventions. Since 1990, we've had the actual regime that we are having. And this actual regime is so-called democratic regime. But before that regime, we have had many repressive regimes coming one after another, where civil society organizations don't at all have space. It means that before 1990, we don't have more than 20 civil society organizations that have been created in Chad, because we just don't have the right to create any organization to defend anyone's right or try to work for any reason, because the only one person that we all can listen to is the government itself. no matter what they do, no matter what happens, everybody have to accept it. And this is the very repressive system that most of the country are experiencing. So since 1990, we have this new regime that allows civil society organization to be created. And we are having many organizations that have been created lastly, but still, I cannot say that it is very safe. It is very interesting to be in the civil society. It is not at all comfortable, because even though we have the opportunity to be present, to be able to create our space, to be able to create a space that allows us to defend human rights, to try to involve ourselves in development issues, we are facing many challenges. Especially on the shrinking space, we are just having our space more and more shrinked due to many reasons, especially when you are a human rights defender, then you are the target anyways by the regime or the ruling party. But anyways, I think being in the civil society today, it is a challenge. But this is our goal, so I think we are taking as much risk as it takes to be able to do what we are doing. And the conflict and war and the instability is not only linked to Chad, because right now we are having these issues all along the region. With the crisis of Lake Chad, we are having more conflict, more terrorist attack at the region. We are also having at the same time more refugees coming, because even at the beginning we had many refugees from Sudan, especially on the Darfur story. We have had thousands of refugees coming from the war in Darfur to be able to have space in Chad. And these people still are in Chad for like more than 20 years, because we are working on the integration system to be able to give them space, because they don't want to go back in Darfur, because in Darfur the situation has stayed in the same state, like there's no move, the violence are still there. And now recently we are experiencing many crises, especially in the Central African Republic. It's a neighboring country, where we are having rebel attacks and the population violence between community, like the interreligious violence that have been created within the community, and that push many people to flow and come back to the southern part of Chad. I think all these issues will push us to say that it is not really a very comfortable situation, and the violences are increasing more and more due to multiple reasons. The first reason is the political one, because the biggest violence cause in Chad is the political position, where the president don't want to move, he stays there for life. And then at the same time, people try many times through elections and they fail, because the elections are always been tricked. So the only other way for them to be able to go against the regime is to go on rebellion, and that one will create more and more violence. Even right now, we're having rebellion in northern of Chad. So in terms of context, I think we as civil society organization, we need maybe to focus more on our space and see if we have more space, or we're facing many challenges. And the answer that I will give is, we really don't have a comfortable space due to these different issues going around.
Okay, perhaps you have mentioned Darfur and Sudan.
Yeah.
And as everybody remembers, in the 90s, there was a very big uprising in Darfur, in Sudan, and it led to that the government went in with force, and hundreds of thousands of people moved into Chad. So that's one big group of refugees. Then you mentioned Central African Republic, which actually has been in turmoil for 30, 40 years. internal strife, and there are also a lot of refugees going into Chad.
Yeah, definitely.
Then you mentioned internal
Lake Chad issues. Lake Chad.
yeah, internal Lake Chad.
Crisis.
But you haven't mentioned anything of south of Boko Haram and its effects on Chad. Is there no effects of?
The effect of Boko Haram is the Lake Chad crisis itself. Because in Lake Chad, we are having this lake that is being shared by 4 countries. We have Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and Nigeria. Now, the problem is we are having a huge population from these 4 countries living on Lake Chad space. But then we're having this identity problem where these people don't know to which country they belong to. And then when the sect of Boko Haram has started in Nigeria, and then they found these vulnerable people and they took advantage of it. And that's how Boko Haram penetrated in Chad. And the consequences of the Boko Haram attacks are still on in Chad. And this is the biggest reason why we are having this crisis on the Lake Chad region. So I think when I mentioned the Lake Chad crisis, it's obviously the Boko Haram crisis that is linked to it.
Perhaps then one has to go one step further and ask, why has the whole problem in Lake Chad started? And I mean, now we are coming to the more environmental issues. Can you give a little history about environment and Chad?
Yes, Lake Chad has been a very big water space for many peoples, like almost to 12 million from the different 4 countries to live in, and especially 2.5 million people live directly from the water, fishing, etc. But now with the environmental changes, we are having this water space shrinking more and more. And then we are having problems because these same people that lives with these natural resources or water resources cannot have space for themselves. And then it's creating more and more crisis because it's very difficult to live where there is nothing to rely on. This is the environmental aspect, but it's still this environmental aspect has led to a security aspect where we have more people and less resources. And then people will just fight with each other just to have opportunity to or resources to be able to live. And then there is another irresponsibility from the 4 countries that I'm always talking about, is of the identity one, because these people living on the Lake Chad region are left for themselves. There's no because no country knows which part of water belongs to me and take care of these people. There's no schools, there's no hospitals, nothing at all, because these people live in water. And there is in the part of Chad, we have another problem, which is within the community itself. The problem is the people live in the water side are called Buduma, and the people living on the land side are called Kanembu. So the Kanembu thinks that Buduma don't have the right to step on the land. And then every time you come to the land, they will just tell you politely to take your stuff and go back to the water, because you don't belong to the land side. And this is a very big challenge for them, because they cannot still live on the fishing, and even this fishing is becoming impossible. And we have had opportunity to meet some of the Lake Chad, this Buduma living on the water. We have had some interview with them, and men will just tell you that, you know what, like 10 years before, Lake Chad is men's issue. We have space, we have water, we have big fish, but now it's women's issue because there's no more fish and small fishes. So we men, we don't even go to there. This is women's work. Like if no more water, no more fish, then women can take care of it, because we don't have to. And I think this is also to explain that the environmental aspect has brought to an insecurity problem within the region, And there is, I think the prevention wasn't a priority because all the time organizations working on the environmental aspect are giving alert to these different countries and even to the international community that if you leave the Lake Chad be shrink that way, then you will face the consequences. But the prevention wasn't maybe a priority. And then today we are finding ourselves in a very serious problem where we don't prevent, but we manage the conflict that already exists in the region. Yes.
Yeah, to understand this, and one has to look once again at the region and see that this is just south of Sahara. It's a very dry area, yep. The whole Sahel region, where this was a central part. Historically, people lived from a huge lake, Lake Chad. It was a huge lake. But because of the climate change and because of the increase of population, one must add that, the lake has become smaller and smaller and smaller. And it has become drier and drier. Yeah. And the conflict started, of course, because people had to move, particularly the nomads. They moved according to a certain pattern from north to south and between the countries for years, right. For hundreds of years. But this became more and more difficult because, I mean, there were less and less grass. And this has led to, here you can clearly see that environmental changes, climate change has led to security problem because people, less and less, and the people have to fight more and more, more and more people have to fight for less and less land and less water.
Right, and resources.
And the resources. So I mean, to add, I mean, you have a lot of problems in the region, as you have described, and you have a lot of problems internally, and you have a problem of environment. And all these things have then led to a very unsecure situation.
Right.
Is that the right way of describing?
Yes, I think that's the right word, because we are in this situation because of what we said. And now, maybe to be a little bit clear on what we are doing, before you ask, I'm anticipating. You know, regarding the Lake Chad issues, ourselves, we work on the women's and youth participation on the development arena, and as well as the political participation of women and youth. So when the Lake Chad crisis has started, from Chadian side, we decided to participate to the bringing solution to the crisis. And then the government itself and the big organization, as we know, they started working very hard, bringing the first aid or the humanitarian aid to these people in needs. And later on, every time that they do, and then they come back to evaluate, it seems like things are not moving as they wish so. So they decided to hold like a big meeting at the UNDP office, and then we have been invited. So what happened is, we told them very clearly that if you go to Lake Chad, you cannot address this crisis if you don't involve young people and women from the crisis area itself. And then they decided to involve, first of all, young people and women in committees, because we have the Boko Haram that have easy access to islands where government and United Nations organization don't have access because of the security. So now what you have to use is to use the young people and women that knows better the islands and know better their reality to be able to access where they cannot access, and try to bring some stability and some activities on these islands. And it worked very well, and this example was like one of the example that was replicated in other countries bordering the Lake Chad region, exactly like Cameroon and Nigeria, because they think it is a very powerful tool, not to go alone, but bring the people that belongs to the area to be able to be part of the solution.
What is Boko Haram in practice? What does it mean? If you are going to counteract Boko Haram, what does it mean?
Okay, first of all, Boko Haram, because Boko Haram started in Nigeria, not in Chad. So even the word Boko Haram means, this is what they told me anyways, it's like school is forbidden or something like that. This is the meaning I know about Boko Haram. Now, I think, as far as I'm concerned, Boko Haram is a group of people having some ideologies. That is, I cannot really very link it to religious, because I don't believe that someone belongs to a religion when you wake up one morning, you kill people either in church or mosque. So I cannot believe you belong to a religious part, because you're just killing everybody that is standing in your path. So for me, Boko Haram is like a group of people having some ideologies of not accepting like the how do you call it, the civilization or the external school systems. They started very small like this, but later on they have been maybe linked to other big networks of terrorist groups, etc. And then it gained more power and more impacts on what they do on the region. But for myself, it's like a group of lost people that don't know what they want, and they're just attacking everyone without any reason.
And how big are they in Chad?
In Chad, you know, the only part that is being attacked by Boko Haram in Chad is the Lake Chad region. The only one attack we had outside Lake Chad is at the capital city, twice. After that, we didn't have any Boko Haram attack, but in Lake Chad region and the neighboring areas, we're having a lot of attacks every day. So the impact in Chad is so high. You know, even in the refugees camp, if they have opportunity, they just come and attack. And we're having many, many attacks, many days. It's on a daily basis. And they just have to grab any opportunity, like if they have someone that they convince to go to the market and blast, that's a very good opportunity. So even today, the attacks are going on in Chad, but especially on the we call it a region of Bol. This is the region which is the most affected by the Boko Haram attack, while the rest of the regions of Chad, we are being so vigilant, taking some preventive measures, because we are organizing ourselves to prevent Boko Haram attacks. And I believe 2 years ago, when we had 2 attacks in the capital city, people got to catch these people, and then the whole network that came to the capital city and then put them on prison. So it is like we are having preventive measures against it. But it's still, these preventive measures don't work in the Lake Chad region, because they are many. They have like sophisticated arms. They are fabricating themselves the blasts. Like, they know how to do it themselves. It's not like they are ordering it from outside. And then it's very difficult to control them, very difficult to track them, very difficult to even understand how they operate, and it's becoming more and more difficult.
So when you mentioned this big meeting that took place with UNDP and others,
yeah,
and where you were invited, was this in order to tackle the problems in Lake Chad region only, or was this a national meeting?
No. This meeting was especially on the Lake Chad region, because this is where the crisis is. And that meeting was held because they think going alone is not the solution, and they cannot make a big impact. So they wanted to involve more population and autochthone. You call it autochthone people? Like people belonging to the area. In French, we call it autochtone. So yes, autochtone, c'est quoi autochtone, c'est quoi en anglais? Local. Yes, we call them autochthone in French. So local people, if local people are not involved, the impact is not at all as big as we really wish to see. So when they decided to involve local people, they thought about, first of all, women and youth, which is completely normal, because we have a very high population of women in Lake Chad region, and especially even on those affected areas, you know, the Boko Haram is more men than women, even though sometimes they use women to the blast and things. So we have many widows, women. They decided to involve women and youth, and that was a very interesting meeting because what we have proposed have been taken into consideration. And when they implemented it, they thought it's a very good example to replicate in the different 3 countries to be able to tackle the Boko Haram story and also access where they alone cannot access.
So this was a collaboration between government and the civil society?
Right.
Did you bring in the environmental issues also in this?
It is the environmental issue, it is always there because this is the root cause of the conflict itself. So right now we are having like long-term goals and short-term goals. The short-term goals is tackling the urgent problem we have on the table, which is the conflict and the people affected by the conflict, the refugees and people that are the vulnerable people that are left or trapped within the islands that need help to come out of the island because it's difficult to access where they live in. And they have also the fear that they had with this experience led them to a situation where a feeling where they don't want to open themselves to anyone. Like even if you are a military from the government or UN or any someone coming to the island, they don't want to open up to you because they are afraid, they cannot like trust you. So this is the urgent issue we are all trying to tackle. But the long-term goal is to tackle the environmental issue with global solutions to the Lake Chad region because they have been envisaging many solutions at the same time. And I am not from our environment, I don't understand much about it. But all I know is we really have to have a sustainable solution for these resources to be preserved so that these people don't have to migrate from their place to another place. And if they don't do so, it means that we are decreasing the violences and conflicts.
So what you are telling us is that when you tackle questions of violence, you have to work with many aspects at the same time. The social, the political, economic, and the environmental issues.
Right. Yeah, this is normal because as far as our youth organization is concerned, we ourselves are developing not a project but a program for a socio-economic development of the region of Lake Chad with the African Union Bureau and UNFPA. So the goal is what? We know right now the complete planet is focused more on the crisis of Lake Chad, and then people are working on the humanitarian side of it to be able to save more lives and try to reintegrate some people. But from our side, we think that poverty and inequality, economic inequality, are also one of the root causes of violence in this region. So what we're doing is to try to develop some social economic activities to help them reintegrate the refugees to be able to reintegrate on the region and help them have identities because they don't have any, nothing at all. They don't speak the language we speak because they all speak Hausa and they don't have any identity. You don't know who they are. So we are tackling this problem and at the same time a long-term development program for them to have income generator activities to be autonomous because we believe if they are not autonomous and then they depend on the daily basis food, then the same problem will still come again and again because they will feel just like they are abandoned for themselves and they are ready to die.
You mentioned refugees. These refugees from Sudan and from Central African Republic, are they placed within the Lake Chad region or elsewhere in Chad?
No. The Sudan refugees are still on the eastern part of Chad. And many of them have been reintegrated in the region. The refugees from Central African Republic, they are staying in the southern part of Chad, which is called Gore. And they are, even in there, we have many organizations working for their own reintegration. But in these two parts of the refugee camps, we don't have like urgent humanitarian crisis where we still have these people on the land of Chad, but the violences are still on, like Lake Chad. It is different. We don't have violence going on right now on these two different camps. The only urgent action that we need to take is for the crisis of Lake Chad for the moment.
But you mentioned refugees in Lake Chad.
Right.
So which are they?
Because we don't know who they are. That's the problem. They come from the islands, and we believe all the 4 countries are responsible of it because they don't know if they are Chadians or not. So we call them refugees because they are coming from the Lake Chad space. And then we are having many of them. Like in Chad, we are having a lot of people coming outside the crisis of Lake Chad. Some of them are called returnees because maybe they are outside the lake, now they are within the country on the land. And some of them are refugees because they don't speak the Chadian language, they don't like recognize themselves as Chadians. So they are refugees, and then we think, even though they are refugees, the action that we should take is to try to reintegrate them within the region and accept them to have a space on the land, because this is not what happened like decades earlier. No right to have land space at all.
So is the government view to reintegrate them into Chad, or is it to call them refugees and push them to another of the countries in the neighborhood countries?
I think right now the government itself and the international community and the 4 countries are developing a strategy of stabilization of Lake Chad. This strategy is not yet finished, but within the strategy, the goal is every country has to take its responsibility. You take as much people as you can from the islands, and then we consider them as Chadians. But as for the moment, as they don't have any identity and nothing, we have to take some steps for them to recognize themselves as Chadians. But until then, they're called refugee. But after that, we give them IDs, they will become Chadian, and the civil society of Chad, especially the NGOs of women, young person, and all the development actors are working for the integration of these people. Because we believe letting them go back to the water is not at all a solution, as the water is becoming even empty water. There's no resources, nothing. You cannot live within an empty, just a small part of water. You have to have space on the land, and you have to develop maybe to be more flexible from just fishing to another activity that people will try to teach you to develop income generator activity and be able to take care of yourself and your children.
Now we come then to collaboration, first of all, between the 4 countries. This meeting you mentioned, this was a Chadian meeting only, or the one with the UNDP, and was that only for
yes, yes, it is in Chad. It was organized in Chad.
But was it for all 4 countries, or?
No. All 4 countries have a platform called CBLT, Commission des Bassins du Lac Chad. CBLT is acting like a secretariat to tackle the whole Lake Chad issues together. Now, the UNDP meeting that we had is regarding the Chadian part of the crisis, like how civil society can be involved and how the local people can be involved to tackle the problem together to be able to bring a sustainable solution. So that was at the national level and concerning national civil society organizations.
Can you talk a little more about how the 4 countries then collaborate?
The 4 countries collaborate through the platform that I've just talked about, the CBLT, because they have to have a common synergy to be able to tackle the problem. The first of all, CBLT is a platform that was created in 1984 to tackle the environmental aspect of the Lake Chad. But later on, with this crisis, then they have put more actions on it: humanitarian action, social development action, economic development action, to be able to put concrete actions on Lake Chad and have a sustainable development goal within this strategy. So I think these 4 countries are acting together, as they have the same secretariat that is located in Chad, to be able to bring their contribution through this platform going directly to the Lake Chad region and be able to make effective actions to change the environmental aspect and the humanitarian aspect of the crisis.
So what is your opinion on the international community? What should they do? What haven't they done? Or
I think as I am holding responsible the 4 countries about what is really happening and the alert that people are giving, especially environmentalists, because last year we have had the opportunity through WILPF Sweden to come and participate in Swedish Forum, where we have had a very interesting expert meeting on Lake Chad issues. And then we've had many environmentalists coming to the table and saying, you know what, like 7 years before, 10 years before, we have given some alert about the environmental problem of Lake Chad. We wanted the international community and the 4 countries to learn from our alert, or take into consideration the alert and try to bring solution before we come to it. This is a preventive solution they are bringing on the table. And what made me feel that the international community and even the 4 countries have failed preventing this problem. And it's very clear, it's obvious, because when somebody alerts you about a problem, you don't have to sit down and wait until the problem occurs and then you rush and say we have crisis, we have refugees, and story. So it's like the international community, first of all, should focus more on the preventive space. But now it's almost too late, and now the international community is, of course, contributing to the Lake Chad crisis, especially on humanitarian aid. And we have many countries bringing their aid. I think even Sweden, it's bringing humanitarian aid to the Lake Chad region. But now, as we talk about the topic that brings us together here, I think if we need a sustainable peace, we really have to think about root causes of violences. And the root causes could be like the one we have right now about the Lake Chad is the environmental aspect. We don't want conflict and violences to come, then we have to take preventive measures. And it's the same in other aspects, like if in a country where we are having inter-community violences or even political violences, social violences, we have frustration, etc. It is the reason because people don't have basic needs. And this is the main reason why we are having more and more conflict in Chad. I will just take the context that I understand more. And the context that I know the most is the Chadian context. We are having serious problem giving our own solution to the basic problems. The basic problems is you don't have to concentrate yourself on the capital city of the country. When we say Chad, people ask us how many population you have. We say 14 million, and 14 million people don't live in the capital city. In the capital city, we have only 2 million people. But where do the rest of the population are living? Do the government is really taking care of these people? Do these people have the basic need they must have? This is their right anyways. In every constitution, in every country, we say these basic things the government should do because this is the citizens' right. But we feel like these basic things are not at all being done anymore. After years and years of democratic or not, the constitution is still almost the same about this question. But we feel like when I say basic things, it means like going to hospital if you are sick. But if you don't have hospital, then where do you go? The basic things like education. and education, the lack of education is it's a cause of many problems we are having, not only conflict. Even if we go beyond conflict, we are having many, many problems because people don't have the opportunity to go to school, and then they are so limited at some times about, they don't have any knowledge, they don't know about their rights, they don't know about their duties, they just live by themselves without any knowledge. And these people are more likely to be used for violences than an open-minded person, because if you are open-minded, it is difficult for a person to manipulate you easily. And if we take the lake chat issues, because these people are not at all able to analyze some of the things by themselves, they don't have any access to information. We were so shocked to know that people living in this island for hundreds of years never had TV, no radio, no phone, no information at all. It's like they don't even know if that's the Lake Chad region is a planet, or we have other countries or other people living beyond this space. So I think this kind of issue can lead easily to serious crisis, because these people can easily be manipulated and used to create violence. And when we take the Boko Haram issues, Boko Haram could be a group of small, like among the people, 10 people or 20 people, using a huge amount of people that don't understand what they do. So this is the opportunity they are taking every time. We don't know how many there are, but what I know is they are finding easy people to use. And these easy people, we are responsible of their situation, because we didn't give them opportunity to go to school, no access to information, so they're just like ready to take any action that somebody tells them. And this is a high-risk problem we need to address to be able to.
Okay, you mentioned we. Now we come to your personal intervention.
Yeah.
Can you just give a quick summary of why and how you have acted on a personal level in order to improve the situation?
So the reason I find myself in these activities, it's because of my own experience. I've lived in a very more conflict country, where at sometimes the killings and violence seems even normal lifestyle for us as children, because this is our daily life, daily experience. So we have had, when we had the dictatorship regime from 1982 to 1990, it's like 8 years of repressive regime. We have had many people killed, and especially even within the family. We've had many people killed, and most of them the same day. So it was like a very unbearable shock that the family got. And as children, we didn't really understood much about what it feels like losing 10 uncles, maternal uncles, the same day. But later on, we understood, and it was very difficult to bear it. So myself, I decided to join the victim movement, where people are asking for justice. And every time we have killings, because you don't have the right to ask for justice. You can see your people being killed, but you don't have the right to ask for justice. So for myself, it was like it is a sad story, but I was inspired to be able to do something for my family and myself, because myself, I was so unconsolable about this situation, and I said maybe I have to just take the smallest step I can to be able to ask for their rights. They are dead, but we can ask for their right and their family's right. And we come to a conclusion when in Senegal, the dictator, Hissène Habré, that perpetrated all these thousands of killings. He has put in jail for life, I think no more than 2 years ago. I think you maybe know the story. So what I believe is we live in a very violent world where people, sometimes they are protecting their own interest and they are ready to sacrifice the whole population to be able to stay on power. Sometimes we also have this problem of inter-community issues because in Chad we have more than 100 ethnic groups. We speak more than 100 different languages. So when one of the ethnic group is in power, all the others will be more criticizing the same and creating more conflicts within the community. This is also something that will push us into violence. So what we do as young people is to try to have space for women and youth at the political level, because what we believe is you can ask for your right 1,000 years, but as soon as you don't have the opportunity to sit on the table and decide on the future of the country, on the development, on the program, on the action plans, you cannot have big impact. So we are not asking for ourselves, we are asking for more spaces on the decision-making positions for women and youth. And we are happy to say that we had some institutional reforms recently in Chad, like 6 months ago. And then there is 30% of places of seats are guaranteed for women, and 30% of seats are guaranteed for youth. So it's like the majority must be women and youth everywhere, like in the government, like at all decision-making positions. So for us, the fight has brought us to a solution, even though we think we don't have to stop the fighting. But regarding the conflict and violence, we work in the Women International League for Peace and Freedom, the section of Chad that we have set up in 2014. And the biggest work that we do, it's advocacy. We also do capacity building and community activities. So we focus on the 1325 resolution of Security Council that works more on the involvement of women on the peace processes. And at the same time, the 1325 resolution focuses also on the involvement of women and women at the position, like decision-making positions. So we are trying to raise awareness within the community because most of the women don't even know the existence of this resolution. So the first step is not to ask for maybe an action plan, but to try to have more allies. Having more allies is like talking to more people, more women, and more women organizations about the existence of the resolution. And then now we come to a step where we have a committee, a multi-stakeholders committee, to work on the draft of the National Action Plan of the Resolution 1325, because we believe violence have more effects, negative effects on women and youth. And this is the experience we had even earlier on our own story, because when we have rebellion, the target is young people, especially men. So if you have a group of rebels going out to take power, then you see young people targeted and brought to the rebel side to fight against the government. And we also see the government doing the same thing, targeting young people. Like, what I mean is, if there is conflict, then the most victim people are young and women. The reason why women are also the biggest part of the victim is because even in history, when Women International League has started just before the First World War, la Première Guerre mondiale. Any French speaking here?
Continue.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So after the First World War, women have realized something very important. Because at the beginning, people think weapons, nuclear, war, and tanks are only for men. And then women have to sit back at home and wait for the result of the war. Anyways, it could be positive or negative. But when, after the war, women have realized that the biggest victim of what happened, it's women. Because at the same time, you lose your husband, you lose your son, and you become so vulnerable that it's even better if you died with them, you know? So it's for someone who is lost, who's dead, we don't know his feelings. But what about the woman who's still alive and who don't have space, who don't have possibility to live by herself because she's so vulnerable and there's no opportunity for her because at that stage, women don't have the right to maybe work or go to school or I don't know what in 1915. So we are having these same problems even today in Chad because where we are having violence, especially in the extreme north of Chad, we are using young people and men only to go to war. But these women that are left behind, did they go to school? Do they know to have any activity like autonomous activity? They don't know anything. And this is the cultural aspect of conflict. Like we have this culture that says women should stay at home. You don't have the right to go to school. So
a final question, and then we have a few questions open. You would perhaps already touched it in the beginning, but what you are doing, is it dangerous? Are you open for risks in your daily life?
I can say yes, it's obvious, because when you work for women's involvement at the political level, first of all, you are targeting other people's seats, and this makes it very difficult and very dangerous. And being an activist, it's naturally a very dangerous activity, and we are aware of it. We are aware of it, and we think that we live in a world where everyone needs to know what to do. And if I decide to be an activist, then I will be an activist with the risk that it takes. And then I will assume myself, I'm an activist and I know the risk. I would take measures to prevent these risks, of course, but I know at the same time it is very dangerous in some part of the world, and especially where we live, because you could easily be targeted if you are an activist. So I think what we do is dangerous, but it is very fundamental to bring peace and to bring to have everybody get his right. So maybe before we give more space for questions, I think for peace to be sustainable, we don't just have to wait and manage crisis. We have to work for strong institutions, because most of the time we are having violence and crisis because of inequality. People don't feel they are equal. If you have a problem, you go to a justice, then they won't give you justice because the justice itself is influenced. So it means that we need a strong and autonomous institution that can guarantee human rights, human dignity, give us our rights, and works for a real sustainable development that is started with basic needs of the population. We just have everything that we do at the political level or at the highest level should be citizen needs oriented. It should be oriented for the need of the citizen, not for the need of some people that are on top. And I believe we have also corruption in our country, for example, that is weakening all the institutions, because it's easy to corrupt anyone, and someone who is corrupted cannot go the right path. So I think having a strong institution working for a real justice, avoid and fight discrimination and exclusion, and working for the basic needs could be the keys for sustainable development.
Okay, we have 5 minutes, so 2 questions. It's room for at least 2 questions. I don't see anything because of light. Do you have? Okay, one, Malin behind you, and one further back.
I can ask something. We touched on, or you had a question about the international intervention or international community, and I wanted to maybe push a little bit more on that. So how do you feel? Do you think outsiders should rely on, let the locals kind of figure out or decide what's the best way to make the peace last, or should there be more involvement from the outside? What are the kind of pros and cons of outsiders coming in and thinking they know what works for you and how much support you need, and how much can they harm rather than help the peace lasting?
Let's take the other question also.
Yeah.
Take the other behind you.
Hello. I wonder how you are working with building alliances within the civil society. For instance, if trade unions can be involved or is involved in this struggle.
I didn't get the question.
Alliances with other NGOs,
Yeah.
like trade unions. Okay. Any more questions? I see one more. The final.
Hi, I just have a question about the situation of NGOs in Chad. I know earlier this week you talked about it's quite difficult to organize an organization and get it signed off from the government, and that sometimes people from the government start NGOs pretending to be civil society. If you can tell us anything about that.
Okay, you have 3 minutes to answer.
Yes, I will be quick. For the first question about the international aid, I believe when we have crisis, it's very important to have international aid, because anyways, we cannot maybe address this problem alone in terms of maybe technical assistance or financial assistance. Now, what I will maybe tap on is, even though we have international aid, we need to rely on the local competencies, because these people knows better what the best solution could be for their problems. And we are pushing for this, because even right now, working with the United Nations and other stakeholders, we are just trying to make them understand that even though you have the means, you have the capacity, please rely on the local population, because they have organization, they are very organized, they have the possibility to go with you, and they know best what is the real problem and what could be the sustainable solution for their community or their area. Alliances with other organizations, yes, we are having huge networks, and because we are very organized at the civil society level, because we are facing the same threat, so we are supposed to be very close one to another to be able to make our goals happen. So we are having alliances both on the women's side and the youth side. So I think we are having network at all levels, making sure that it is not a governmental NGO or organizations, as she asked the questions, but we are working on very huge networks. The last question about NGOs, this is part of the shrinking space. And this is something that I always link to Chad, because I believe it's more obvious in Chad than other countries. The shrinking space is everywhere, but this specificity is like the government itself create association, human rights associations, development, economic, etc., all the NGOs that we have. And then if there is anything that happens, then these NGOs are more likely to defend easily the government, saying that we are the civil society and we believe what the government did is correct, is good. And this is one of the biggest challenges we are facing, because if they believe, because they know every and each one of us. And I believe to get WILPF registered, we waited for 3 years. Until myself, I meet with the minister himself and tell him what is happening. So it's like when they know you, they will just make it on purpose to forget about your papers or do whatever it takes so you don't have the ability to operate on the field. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The question for this seminar was, what does it take to make a peace last? And as you heard, there are very many things that are required, but I think the most important one is to have activists like you, Amalkher.
And strong institutions.
Persons are extremely important. Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
this
You're
good
welcome.
presentation.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.